What's up everyone? As I have been doing for the past 8 months, I'm gonna let you know what I've seen this month in quarantine. If you're new to this channel, this is a series I do called What I Watched in Quarantine, which is very derivative of Carson Runquist's series called What I Watched This Month. I've gotten a lot of comments recently on this, and yes, I am borrowing from this template. Just to clear that up, it's been a pretty chill month, so I guess let's just jump right into it. I started things off with Babe, produced by none other than George Miller, the guy that made Mad Max Fury Road, helped write and produce this thing. Sorry, it's just a fun fact. I enjoyed this. It was cute and fun and endearing. It doesn't do anything crazy, and the plot is pretty standard and predictable, but in a cute way, you know? My parents have been trying to make us watch this for years, and they finally got us to see it for the first time, and I honestly thought it was really enjoyable, but I probably would have liked it more as a kid, but I think it does do a good job establishing themes that do make a lot of sense in like a normal society, and using them with animals is really effective. So yeah, even though I would have liked this a little more as a kid, I still thought it was pretty solid. Not a favorite, but it's still really good. I followed that up with 21 Jump Street, directed by Phil Lord and Chris Miller. I've heard about this for many years as one of the best comedies of the 2010s, and I thought it was pretty decent. I love Jonah Hill, but Channing Tatum was really the standout here. He proved himself to be a really talented guy with this, and he's absolutely hilarious in this movie. There's just a lot of likability and heart to be found in this film, but not much outside of that. Don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed it, but there's some of the high school stuff that I just thought was pretty standard. Brie Larson just came in and made the film a lot more boring. The stuff with her and Jonah Hill was just kind of it's kind of predictable. Dave Franco was fine in it, but like I said, the buddy cop stuff was easily the best part of the film. The jokes there land, and it has a good message about friendship and brotherhood, and it probably has the best cameo ever, which I will not spoil, by the way. I think this was fun, but some of the plot stuff got in the way of what I wanted to see, which was the buddy cop dynamic. I then rewatched Avengers Endgame. Look, is it flawed? Of course. Are there major inconsistencies? Yes. Are there choices that didn't make a ton of sense? Obviously. But despite all of the crazy flaws this movie has, I don't care. I really don't care. It's just such a fun experience. It was probably my favorite theater going experience ever. I absolutely loved being there. Every time I rewatch it, I get reminded of that time that I first saw it in the theater, and I just broke my face because I was smiling during that final battle way too much. So yeah, I still love this movie after a year of rewatches. It's an absolute blast. It has a really great emotional send-off for some of our favorite characters. I followed that up with Stranger Than Fiction. I was pleasantly surprised at how much I liked this one. I feel like the first half was getting a little tedious, where they could have just tightened up the screws a little bit and got to the point a lot faster, but the second half was a great blend of drama and comedy. This is one of the strangest performances I've seen from Will Ferrell, because it's Stranger Than Fiction. It blends humor with deep sadness and surprisingly well. I also love this film's visual aspect. It just looks fantastic. It sounds weird to say this is one of my favorite looking movies ever, because it's not a typical pick, but I don't really care. This is one of the most visually striking films I've seen in a while. Every shot just looks so aesthetic and weirdly personal. I don't know, there's just something oddly cozy about this one. I like how different and original it is, but sometimes it drags, especially in the first half, but that ending really makes sense. It gets a little pretentious in how the themes are presented, but who cares? This movie was really awesome, and the dialogue was just really exquisite. I then saw the Lego Movie 2 for the first time, since I never got to see it in theaters when it initially came out, and I enjoyed it. It certainly has great jokes, but none of the jokes are specifically memorable or quotable. They're just funny in the moment. There's a twist halfway through that's genuinely unpredictable, but makes the setup for the first half kind of feel a little pointless. That was a little frustrating, but I still had fun with this one. It's a forgettable film, but a worthy follow-up to one of the best and most creative, hilarious animated movies ever made, which was the Lego Movie. I still love that film to this day. I then checked out Superbad for the first time, and I didn't really like it. I can see why people enjoy it, but I found this film to be incredibly repetitive, and that does not play to the film's strength. Jonah Hill yelling at Fogel for changing his name to McLovin is hilarious. After 30 minutes of Jonah Hill yelling, though, I'm kind of sick of it, and I want it to end. Seth Rogen and Bill Hader playing one of the funniest cop duos ever, awesome. Then after 30 minutes, it gets kind of tiring and kind of boring. The whole thing just felt like it took forever and ended up being a chore to sit through. I don't hate this, I just think the jokes are, pretty solid and funny, but they rely a lot on raunchy humor and not much else. The more creative writing comes from stuff with the cops, but like I said, after a while that does get a little old. You see where I'm going with this? This is just one of the most overrated comedies I've seen in a while. It has good bits, but it's overall pretty tiring after less than an hour of the same jokes. The heart was in the right place and it's full of really talented people, so I respect that. It's just not really my thing, and after seeing Forgetting Sarah Marshall and Anchorman, I'm gonna have to be safe to say that I'm not really a fan of Judd Apatow, but Walk Hard is still amazing. Then I watched Instant Family, and I enjoyed most of it. Similar to Superbad, the heart is in the right place, and it's better than Superbad in a lot of ways, but it does come with some issues. Mostly just how inconsistent the writing and characters are. Sometimes the characters are endearing, and sometimes they're just very mean-spirited, and it feels kind of rocky and, I don't know, kind of manipulative. I know people are like that sometimes, but they just have really abrupt shifts in tone, and it just didn't work for me. Also, I don't want to sound like a suburban mom right now, but I really didn't like the use of profanity in this film. If you see a poster like this, a title called Instant Family, it seems like it's made for families, and it just had way too much adult humor, and that I just wouldn't watch this with my kids. Profanity is just something that doesn't bother me that much ever since, I went to public school, but I do notice it quite a bit in films, and if it's something like The Wolf of Wall Street or Goodfellas, for example, it works because it fits those characters' traits. Harsh language comes from a harsh lifestyle. The way these people are living is not harsh at all. When people swear in this, it just doesn't feel right. It feels forced and awkward, and I don't really like it. And it's a movie about two people adopting some kids, and it should just be a heartwarming family comedy, but they just bombard it with so many words that do not fit these characters' personalities at all. That's my little rant for the day. I'm sorry, I will stop now, but I just wanted to put that on the table. So I would recommend this to teens and adults because it is cute in that own little way, but it's not much of a family film, which makes zero sense to me because it never commits to being a family film, but it never completely commits to being for adults either because it's super cheesy at the same time. I then had the unique opportunity to watch The Empire Strikes Back in a Regal theater on the last day ours was open. It was bittersweet because I got to watch one of my favorite movies in a theater chain that I grew up on, but it was sad that I had to say goodbye to Regal, but yeah, The Empire Strikes Back is sick. It's funnier, darker, and more romantic, more exciting, and a lot more deep than the first movie. And don't get me wrong, I love the first movie to death. It's still like top 10 of all time. This one I think is just slightly better. Gotta love that ending, Then I saw Before Sunrise again. So I just got my wisdom teeth out right before I saw this, when I decided to watch this thing to distract me from the pain, and it sure did work. I needed something calming yet effective to take my mind off of things, and it really, really worked. I can't believe how good this film is. The first time I saw it, I gave it a 4 or something like that, and then the second time it was a 4.5, and now it's just a straight 5. It's a near perfect movie in my opinion. It's just a solid love story that feels nuanced and real, and how they approach a look on life and humanity is so captivating and beautiful all at once. There's literally a scene at a restaurant where they show a bunch of people from a bunch of different types of places speaking a bunch of different languages, and they're talking to each other at separate tables, and you get to focus on these different sets of people. You get an individual shot of each person, and most of the time I don't even know what they're saying because they're speaking in different languages, but I just found it to be so beautiful and profound. This correlates back to what Jesse says at the beginning of the film when he talks about people having this perception of how a dog sleeping in the sun is beautiful, but someone using an ATM machine isn't, or something like that. I don't know, it's just really profound stuff. I really like how they touch on this and humanity, all that good stuff. Then I rewatched Before Sunset. This is now a top 5 of all time for me. I am genuinely in love with this film. It has some of my favorite movie lines ever, and it's such a peaceful yet tense look and a mess of a relationship that can't be controlled, while also getting to know our central main characters more in a way that makes them feel like we know them on a personal level. I can't believe that I felt like I've lived both of these people's lives, and I'm not even shown anything. It's all cleverly written dialogue, and this is all in the span of 80 minutes, and that's it. This is one of the best movies I've ever seen, one of my favorite films of all time. I'd even go as far as to say this is a perfect film. And then I ended the trilogy with Before Midnight, which I have a difficult relationship with, because on one hand, I think it's a beautiful look on like a failed marriage, and the arguments feel like real arguments. They're grounded and real, but the messages also get a little skewed since, our two main characters are written to be really unlikable in this one. Jesse's kind of a scumbag, and Celine is really raunchy for some reason. Though I still love the characters and care about them, they still have really frustrating arcs that make me kind of mad at them, but it also helps me to accept the reality of their situation. These movies aren't just cute, they're actually very deeply written movies, and this one is the least cute of all of them. It gets off of that rail of being dreamlike like the first one. So yeah, I do love Before Midnight in its own way, but it's also very hard to accept the reality of what's happening to our characters. But this is also a really good thing. Since the writing is so good, I'm able to feel invested in the characters' lives and feel frustrated at the characters' actions because I care about them. That just shows effective screenwriting. It truly worked. I want to make an in-depth video about this trilogy sometime because it's probably my favorite trilogy of all time. I then saw Master and Commander: The Far Side of the World, directed by the dude who did Dead Poet Society and The Truman Show, two films I adore, by the way, and it was pretty great. At first I thought it was going to be a boring period drama with one-note characters, but I was pleasantly surprised that it was going to be a really exciting adventure with really colorful, distinguishable characters. Though I didn't remember anyone's name, I still care for and liked these characters. They give you a reason to like them. These are interesting and heroic protagonists that move the plot along in an interesting way. This actually has a very straightforward concept, which I appreciated, but what I appreciated the most was the practicality of everything. The sets were real, the costumes were real, the props were real, the atmosphere was real. It was so old-fashioned and awesome. It's been a while since I've seen an epic period film where everything in the movie is real. I hate how CGI is so overutilized today, but this film took me back to a time where everything could be authentic visually and also super entertaining at the same time. Now I feel like period drama films are either CGI fest or super boring these days. This mixes practicality with entertainment wonderfully, and this was just a breath of fresh air. Super underrated. I am so surprised I had not heard about it until now. I followed that up with Tolkien, the biopic about J.R.R. Tolkien starring Nicholas Hoult, and I didn't really enjoy it. It had potential to make itself unique since it is about one of the most creative and imaginary novelists ever, but this movie follows such typical tropes in the most boring way possible. This is a competently made film, didn't do anything terrible, and the cinematography and editing were passable. The first act was incredibly boring. I really did not care about this guy because they gave me zero reasons to care. I never felt his emotions or struggles because there was nothing for me to attach to. This guy's personality was so distant from the audience, so I didn't know what to latch onto. Nicholas Hoult is fine in it. Again, he doesn't do anything insanely amazing, but he's fine. He didn't do anything terrible either. The editing did the job, but even if it was super choppy, it never felt inconsistent or just really bad. You see, I tried my best to like this, but I never got into it at all. It just felt rushed, boring, predictable. It was a biopic that I'm probably never going to be able to revisit. Then I got to see a film that insanely shocked me, American History X. This is one of the most important and adult films I've ever seen. I demand anyone who hasn't seen it and is ready to be disturbed to go check it out. It is insanely important because it addresses so many social issues. I never really felt like watching it initially because the only thing I heard about it was like Edward Norton played a neo-Nazi in it, and that's pretty much it. I'm glad I was able to check it out because it's one of the best political films out there. First off, I love the filmmaking here. It's on the line of between raw authenticity and experimentalism. It's so different, and the way it's shot feels like it's speaking directly to us. Everything is framed. When conversations are happening, then you get to actually, it's framed in a way where they're looking directly into the camera, and it's very effective. I haven't seen a Spike Lee movie before, and that's just because I haven't made time to do it, but I feel like this is similar to a Spike Lee joint, but from the perspective of the white man. This film is fueled with insane anger and rage that I somehow couldn't look away from. I was both angry and fascinated by the way these people live and think. It's such a screwed up ideology, and it makes me sad that actual human beings, like real people, believe this garbage that the characters in the movie believe. The messages are so intensely powerful that I just felt hooked from scene one. There's one scene that I won't spoil, and if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about, that I almost closed my eyes during it, which I never do. It was stomach churning and super cruel, but it shows the harsh reality of the situation. This movie is never not taking itself seriously, and usually that would annoy me, but with the subject matter, it needed to be. It needed to be serious, and in the end, this film feels like poetry. I feel like this is one of those movies they would show in high school. It feels targeted towards younger adults because that's the group that would probably understand these messages they're trying to convey. I followed that up with Beauty and the Beast, the original 1991 classic, and if you didn't know this already, it's my favorite animated film of all time. I honestly think it's a perfect movie. It's so magical and heartwarming and feels sincere in the most genuine way possible. I feel like some of the other Disney Renaissance movies like to have a lot of comic relief, like the Genie, Timon and Pumbaa, Mushu, etc. I love those guys, by the way. But this movie doesn't really have that. They have silly characters for sure, but they never felt like they steal the show or take the movie hostage. I don't know. All I'm saying is Beauty and the Beast is the best Disney movie, and if you don't believe it, go revisit it because it will really blow you away with its pure heart. There's just something so genuine and pure about it. Man, I missed when films were actually 2D animated. They were so much better. 3D animation is just so overused these days. Anyway, on to the next one. I then saw The Hunt for the Wilderpeople, and I was pleasantly surprised. The first act got off a little rocky, and I thought it was going to stay that same way, very inconsistent the whole time, and I wouldn't have enjoyed it, but I actually had an absolute blast with this movie. I feel like we've seen these road trips with two people bonding before, but it never takes itself too seriously. That's something Taika Waititi does a great job at, and he does a spectacular job with the direction here. It just has a massive amount of heart while also staying true to telling a compelling story and having hilarious dry jokes. I was genuinely surprised, and I'm honestly debating if I like this or Jojo Rabbit more. It's probably Jojo, but I don't know. This is still really good. Followed that up with Insomnia, directed by Christopher Nolan. I'm thinking I'm gonna do a Nolan ranking sooner or later on this channel, so I won't get into it too much here, but this movie was solid, but it felt like it was lacking that constant intensity that Nolan often has with his films, and in the end, felt like an above average thriller that could have been directed by anyone. It didn't really have that Nolan flair that I wished I would have saw, but on its own, it's still not amazing, but it's pretty good. This is still underrated in my book and has one of the most memorable but legitimately great performances from Al Pacino. Then I gotta see the new Netflix documentary The Social Dilemma and talk about preachy. I've never enjoyed being told to my face that technology is evil and going to destroy the world, and this is essentially what that movie preaches. I think there are interesting ideas of how social media apps hook us in because that's the point, and they just want more money. They have real tech people talking about this stuff, but they seem to repeat the same information over and over again until I just don't know why this film was 90 minutes and felt like 3 hours. It was really boring after a certain point. They literally could have just turned this into a small documentary short instead of an entire feature-length film because there's not enough to say that hasn't been said already. I felt like these people were repeating the same information but using different nouns and adjectives just to make themselves sound smarter, and it never really worked for me. Also, they have this dramatized family that are all addicted to their phones, and I had a hard time really believing what was being shown to me, even though it was a dramatization and they tell you that. And they actually have these three creepy guys inside of this kid's phone, and they actually show them spouting out all of this dialogue that a mustache twirling villain would say in a cartoon, and they actually expected me to take it seriously. It's just too goofy for me. It's on a different level, but while it did have something interesting to say, it was very repetitive, and just like this review. I then got to watch Nightcrawler for the very first time. I've wanted to check this out for a couple of months, and it did not disappoint. Everyone who has seen this movie praises Jake Gyllenhaal's performance to no end, and I think he deserves all the praise in the world. This is probably his best performance, even though he's established himself to be one of the best actors of this past generation. There's just something so off and creepy about his persona, and I can't really put my finger on it because he's not exactly socially acceptable, while at the same time he's not socially awkward. He wasn't a terrible guy at the start, but was never a great guy either. He was just weird. He was weird and ominous, and I have no idea who he was after spending 2 hours with him. And that's a good thing, by the way. For a while, I thought this was gonna be like a monster movie or something because it was called Nightcrawler, so I thought he was like gonna turn into a werewolf or something. I was so wrong, but there is something very disturbing about the film. It's the direction, the lighting during the night sequences, and obviously the performances. This also has one of my favorite screenplays ever. It's not exactly Aaron Sorkin, but it's also not Noah Baumbach or something in that caliber. It's very natural while also remaining looking very sharp, so I guess a mix of Aaron Sorkin and Noah Baumbach. I love the way the film looked as well. It was almost as visually striking as Drive, but it sure was better than Drive, let me tell you that. I just really enjoyed this one. I guess I only felt slightly disappointed that not more happened. Like, I honestly thought I was going to see a lot more crazy stuff happening, but it stayed pretty grounded and very patient, which was a great strength. I just need to see it again without those expectations in mind. I then got to watch Tangled again for the first time in like 7 years or something, and I really enjoyed it. This is a movie that everyone kind of forgot about, including me, and I'm glad I rewatched it because I kind of love it in a way. It's not one of Disney's best or anything, but I like how classic it feels. The only thing it could have seriously benefited from is making it 2D animated. It would have made the whole film just pop more. The characters are likable and the villain is seriously messed up. I mean, she literally psychologically torments and manipulates Rapunzel, and it pissed me off, and I did not even realize that when I was a kid. Glenn was cool and the animal characters weren't really that annoying. I thought this was a solid Disney film that could have had a little tweaks and obviously really needed to be 2D animated. It's nice revisiting it because I think it's gonna be remade sooner or later, and if they do, I want them to cast Amanda Seyfried as Rapunzel and Ryan Reynolds as Flynn. It would be perfect, but I am honestly sick and tired of these live action remakes, so I hope it never happens. I followed that up with Moneyball with a script by Aaron Sorkin. Unlike most of Aaron Sorkin's other work, this feels a lot more natural and subdued. The whole thing feels very patient in its presentation. Sometimes it does feel a little slow, and other times it feels just right. Brad Pitt is so different in this film because he feels like he's not trying to do anything crazy with his role, but he's also not playing the typical suave guy that he usually plays. He just plays a guy that's trying to connect with his kid and get his job done, and his character makes the film more exciting than you'd expect. This film literally makes math cool, and nobody but Aaron Sorkin could have pulled this off. I think this movie was an absolute blast while also being a very well-made sports movie that's not really about the sport, and it's more about the behind the scenes, and that's what makes it so much more above average. Follow that up with a spooky movie because it's Halloween, baby, and this movie was Psycho. This is probably my favorite horror film, but it's also one of the very few horror films I have seen because I just didn't grow up that way. I just find this to be very ahead of its time. I mean, we all know that, but I'm serious. It's actually that good. The dialogue is so adult and feels authentic, and the different plot points were set up and concluded in a satisfying manner. This is a masterpiece that changed cinema forever, and it's still that good to this day. I then started watching some good old Disney animated movies that I haven't seen in many years, starting with Aladdin. I like Aladdin a lot. I think it's fun and jumpy and just a total blast. It doesn't start getting absolutely great until the genie shows up, but I still love the fast-paced animation and awesome music. The relationship between Aladdin and Jasmine is cute, but not very fleshed out and felt very underdeveloped, but it still had its sweetness even if it was very simple and to the point. Aladdin is an interesting character because he isn't like the best role model for kids, but he does learn a valuable lesson in the end. He's a liar and a thief, literally. So it felt kind of ballsy of Disney to be able to pull that off. Speaking of ballsy, I followed that up with the Hunchback of Notre Dame for the very first time since I never grew up on it. Probably Disney's darkest movie of that era. The opening scene alone is haunting, and the rest of the story continues in that manner, except for the humor, which I absolutely did not like. The humor didn't ease the tension, it distracted from the tension. Whenever something really dark or dramatic or super tense happened, it would follow with those stupid gargoyles talking. I don't think the gargoyles are that annoying. I just think they're unnecessary to the plot, and they hold the movie hostage. If we look past all that, this is absolutely fantastic. The music is epic in scale. I love how they implement religion into the story in a very mature way while making it feel natural to the plot. Frollo is probably the best Disney villain ever. He's so slimy and evil and just the absolute worst, but you can't take his eyes off of him at the same time. I just thought this film would have been one of Disney's best animated movies and best told stories they've ever done if it wasn't for the forced humor. All the movie had to do was commit to one tone or the other, and I picked the darker one. I think it should have went with that. It played with itself too much to give it those 5 stars, but it's pretty close. Then I rewatched The Incredibles since I haven't seen it in over like 2 years when the second one came out, and it's way better than I remembered. This is honestly my favorite Pixar film. The whole thing just lands everything it's trying to achieve in its story. It's such a blast while also giving a really compelling and clever plot. This probably has Pixar's best script. The dialogue feels like dialogue you'd hear in a live action film. The movie feels like it was made for adults and the kids were kind of an afterthought, which I really appreciate. It never once talks talked down to its audience and it feels super grown up. I don't think Pixar can be able to live up to this. I don't remember why I ever called this boring at any point in time, because the whole thing is really well paced. It's not perfect, but it is one of my all-time favorite movies now. It's one of the best animated movies I've ever seen. Top 5 animated movies, probably. And then I ended the month with Ratatouille, also directed by Brad Bird, and it's way better than I remembered as well. It's so cozy, and that's really what I'd describe it as, is cozy. It's such an adorable and comfortable movie to watch. The animation is so fluid and just makes everything pop. I don't remember loving this movie as a kid, but it's really grown on me. There's something so satisfying just seeing these characters move around. The sound design also heightens that satisfaction. I'm not sure what it is, but whenever like a little sound like the crinkling of paper or the chewing of bread is presented, it just makes me feel so happy. I don't know what it is. It's just such a heartwarming movie with a great message. It's easy to get lost in this world, and yes, it's one of Pixar's best to this day, so I'm glad I was able to rewatch it. So that's October for you. I didn't watch a lot of spooky movies this month because I just didn't feel like it, and I don't have much access to horror movies anyway, and I couldn't really find the time, unfortunately. I'll be back next month with more stuff I watched. Thank you guys as always for watching, and if you like this, you can click right here and get Ethan. I can't do it, guys. Oh man, I need to come up with a better catchphrase. Alright, fine, whatever. This is Ethan Butler, and I'm out.